Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to break down one of the biggest disconnects in elk hunting and one of the main reasons why so many hunters put in the work scouting and still come up empty during season. Most elk hunters believe scouting is about finding elk before the season starts, seeing elk, hearing bulls, finding fresh sign. And yes, some of that can be part of it, but that's not the real job of scouting because the reality is elk you find in July or August or sometimes even early September are living in a completely different version of the mountain than they will once pressure hits. Roads get busy, camps show up. Hunters move through the country and elk adjust fast. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter and outdoorsman. The real job of scouting is to understand where elk can survive that pressure and how they use terrain to stay hidden, what access changes their behavior, what wind setups are actually huntable, and where you can realistically intercept them when it matters. Here's the shift you need to make. The wrong way to scout for elk is to scout for sightings. The right way is to scout for repeatable decisions. The biggest scouting mistake a lot of elk hunters make is pretty simple. They're looking for elk instead of looking for conditions that allow elk to live there. We're looking for elk behavior, right? They want to see elk, hear bugles, find fresh tracks, poop, or wallows. And when they do, it feels like confirmation. It feels like success. But the problem is that kind of information is often shallow or temporary. The timing is off because elk presence by itself is weak information. And elk being somewhere today doesn't tell you why it's there. It doesn't tell you if it will still be there once pressure increases. And it definitely doesn't tell you how to hunt that area when everything changes during elk season. Real scouting starts with understanding the conditions that support consistent daylight elk use. That means evaluating food sources, but not just where they are, how close they are to cover. It means identifying security, thick timber, broken terrain, places elk can disappear into when pressure shows up. It means understanding wind advantage, how elk can use thermals and prevailing winds to protect themselves. It means recognizing escape options, where elk go when something doesn't feel right. This is why I found elk in July often means very, very little by September because you didn't find a system, you found one moment in time. The shift is this: stop scouting for proof that elk were there and start scouting for why elk can stay there under pressure and how you can actually hunt that area. Another major mistake elk hunters make is scouting where elk were instead of where pressure is going to push them. A lot of scouting fails because it freezes the mountain in time. You go in during the summer or even early preseason when everything is quiet. Roads are more empty, trailheads are dead, there aren't camps set up, no horses, no steady human movement. You find elk in that version of the mountain, right? And you assume that's where they're going to be when the season opens. But once pressure hits, it's a completely different environment. Now you've got trucks on roads, camps in the same drainage as you scouted, hikers moving through trails, other hunters glassing the same basins, and consistent human movement across the landscape. Elk don't ignore that. They respond to it immediately and adjust. They start avoiding open roads. They shift away from predictable access points. They move into thicker cover, steeper terrain, and areas that give them better security and escape options. In a lot of cases, they don't go far, but they reposition into places that are harder to reach and definitely harder to hunt. This is where secure cover, broken terrain, and restricted access zones become much more valuable than anything you found during preseason. Public to private edges, overlooked pockets near pressure, and areas that function like small refuges often hold more elk during season than the perfect spots you scouted when it was quiet. The shift is this: scouting cannot just evaluate habitat, it has to include pressure forecasts, right? Because elk don't live in the mountain you scouted, they live in the mountain after hunters show up. One of the most common traps in modern elk scouting is letting satellite imagery fool you, too. A spot can look perfect on a screen and still hunt terribly, right? We've all been there. You see big open parks or lush green meadows and north facing timber, maybe a creek running through it, and it checks every box visually. It looks like elk country. So you drop a pin, build a plan around it, and expect it to produce. But pretty country is not the same as usable elk country in the moment. Satellite imagery shows you what looks good. It does not show you how elk move, how they use the terrain, or how that area actually hunts under pressure. You've got to go deeper. That's where topo becomes even more important than just flat imagery, right? Contour lines tell you everything: where elk can travel efficiently, where they can bed with advantage, where they can escape, and where movement gets funneled. Benches, side hills, saddles, subtle contour breaks, and timber edges matter far more than just big, obvious openings. Canopy matters because it provides security and shade. Approach routes matter because they determine whether you can actually hunt the area without blowing it out. The real question you should be asking is not, does this look good? It's, how does an elk move through this? Where do they feed? Where do they bed? What path makes sense with wind, terrain, and pressure? That's movement architecture. The shift is this: stop pinning beautiful country and dropping pins all over it. Start mapping terrain that forces predictable movement and gives you an advantage when you step into it. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations in Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory. It's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. Another mistake that quietly ruins a lot of elk hunts is scouting without a real plan to hunt what you're finding, right? A lot of elk hunters collect pins, photos, screenshots, notes. They build layers of information on maps. But when the season starts, they're still just guessing. They show up to a spot and try to figure it out in real time. That's not great scouting. That's more like organized hope. Real scouting is about execution. Every area you identify should already have a plan attached to it before you ever step foot in there during season. You should know how the wind needs to work for that spot to be huntable. You should know your entry route, right? How you're getting in without blowing elk out based on thermals, right? And the positioning and the slope angle. You should have a first glassing point or listening point at least, right? You should understand where the likely setup is if elk are using that area. And you should know what time of day that location actually matters. Is it a good morning spot? Are they going to be bedded midday? Or is it a great evening spot? You also need to be honest about what a spot is. Is this a place you commit to and hunt thoroughly? Or is it just a place you check quickly and move on to plan B or C, right? Because a pin without context is almost useless. It might mark a location that would look decent, but it doesn't tell you how to make a decision once you're actually there. So the shift is, every scouting point should answer one question: how do I actually hunt this spot? If you can't answer that clearly, it's not necessarily a good scouting point Yet, another mistake that holds a lot of elk hunters back is overvaluing preseason intel and undervaluing in season adjustment. Preseason scouting absolutely matters, right? It can save you time, build confidence, and give you a great starting point. But too many elk hunters treat that information like it's a permanent truth, as if elk are going to be in the exact same places doing the exact same thing once season starts. They won't. Elk do not sign a contract with your summer scouting trip, right? Their behavior changes constantly based on pressure, temperature, moisture, and human activity. As soon as roads get busy, camps show up, and hunters move through the country, elk begin to shift. And sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's immediate, but it always happens. That means old sign, even fresh sign, can go stale fast. A basin that was full of elk 2 weeks ago can feel empty overnight. Not necessarily because the elk disappeared, right? But because they adjusted quickly. This is where a lot of elk hunters get stuck. They keep trying to force preseason information to be right instead of adjusting to what's actually happening. The purpose of scouting is not to lock in a plan, it's to shorten the search once season starts. You should have base locations where elk are likely to be, adjustment locations for changing conditions, and pressure locations for when elk hunting pressure increases. The shift is this: the goal is not to prove you were right in August. The goal is to stay accurate in September and make decisions that match what elk are going to be doing right now in the hunt time, right? Right now, not like right now. We're talking about in September, right? That's what we've got to plan for. So, what does elk scouting actually look like for that? It's not random. It's not just covering ground, and it's definitely not collecting pins and hoping one of them works. Good scouting is filtering, right? It's a filtering process. You're not trying to find elk everywhere. You're trying to eliminate most of the mountain and focus only on the areas that can consistently produce under real hunting conditions. So here's the system that I like to use for scouting. We're going to eliminate, we're going to verify, we're going to map movement, we're going to build an access plan, we're going to follow that by building a win plan, and then we're going to create adjustment options. So all this starts at home. You're going to eliminate dead looking country before you ever step foot on the mountain. Areas with poor access or weak security, bad wind setups, or no clear movement structure get cut immediately. Then you verify on the best zones in person, not everything, just the areas that actually have potential. Once you're there, you map movement. Where are elk feeding? Where are they bedding? How are they traveling between those areas? Where's my transition zones, right? Where are the escape routes? How does pressure influence those paths? From there, you build your access plan. How do you get in clean? Where do you set up? What conditions make this spot huntable or not? Then you build your wind plan. If the wind doesn't work, the spot doesn't work. And finally, you create adjustment options, backup options, where pressure shifts or alternate setups. The goal here is simple. Scouting should reduce randomness and speed up your decisions once season starts, once you show up. If it doesn't do that, it's not working for you. Most elk hunters are not failing this part of the hunt because they don't scout hard enough. They're failing because they scout more emotionally. They tend to chase sightings. They're looking for sightings. They chase sign. They chase moments that feel like progress, but don't actually translate into control when the season starts. And when things change, they don't have anything solid to fall back on, right? That's the difference. Scouting isn't about touring the mountain, especially early on, and hoping that that behavior it maintains until September. It's about building a system you can rely on when pressure hits and decisions matter. So here's the reframe: stop asking, did I find elk? Start asking, did I learn enough to hunt this area with control once pressure starts, once season gets here? Because that's what separates consistent elk hunters from frustrated ones. One is reacting to what they see, the other is operating with structure and a system. And once you make that shift, scouting is going to stop feeling random and it's going to start becoming more of a foundation for everything that happens during your season. Now, if you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structure structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands on application and real time breakdowns, we have an in person Elk Camp 2026 this summer that is built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real terrain. 90% of Elk Camp is going to be running you through as many scenarios as we can so that you're ready for season. You can check that out at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.